Welcome to another PL Together Lounge Talk. I'm Adam Geller, founder and CEO of Edthena, the video coaching platform for teacher self-reflection and peer collaboration. Today, we're talking with Zaretta Hammond about culturally responsive teaching. She is the author of the book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, and she's also a speaker as well as professional developer herself who spends a lot of time in the field with educators doing this work. Zaretta, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's maybe talk a little bit about, for lack of a better word, doing the work if you're an educator. And I think that is in the zone of learning how to examine what is happening inside of our classrooms. And so I think knowing a little bit about your work, the place that we start is by examining what our students are doing inside of our classrooms, right?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. And so, one of the things that I say, particularly when we're talking about being culturally responsive educators, is we have to learn to be the personal trainer of students' cognitive development, cognitive mediators, looking at the content, being able to translate it in a way that helps students leverage and understand it by using their background knowledge and their schema, right? Dr. Richard Elmore talked about that instructional core, the teacher, the student, and the content always being in a dynamic dance. So when we look in the classroom, that dance goes pretty fast. So we need tools to pause ourselves and step back, because in our mind, we are, oh, I did that. I'm letting my kids talk. We have these practices, but when we step back and use something like video, audio clips, low inference transcripts, when we do those things, we get a better snapshot of what's really happening in our class. And it's when we understand what's going on that we actually can make the changes, the small tweaks, the big shifts that are really necessary to move students toward that place where they're being the leaders of their own learning, not because they're being compliant, but because they're having their own aha moments. And so it's an interaction, right? It's a dance. And so we want to see at any point how each dancer is executing their moves. And this is why when I'm working with educators, we always have a collaborative inquiry component. And as part of that collaborative inquiry component, we are videotaping, we are doing peer observations where someone is just going to kind of script what's happening, who's talking, who gets to talk when, so that we get a real understanding if indeed we're moving toward the kind of conditions that help students build that capacity so they can carry more of the cognitive load. Because that instructional piece is really, really important, particularly if we want to accelerate learning. We have to get kids into productive struggle. And again, sometimes we are so in it as teachers because, things going fast and furious in the classroom, our own instructional decision making requires us to step back at times. And particularly when this kind of stuff is new, right? Trying to do it in a way that doesn't fall into simple social justice or over, emphasizing multicultural education, right? Because the diversity and inclusion is important, but that's social. Social justice is important, but that's just kind of talking and thinking about issues, but that doesn't help the student learn how to learn more effectively. So being able to use these techniques so that you know yourself as an instructor, right, as the personal trainer of that student's cognition becomes really critical.
One of the things, as someone who works a lot with video myself, that I think can be so powerful is, the video is this neutral observer, right? The video isn't expressing an opinion. The video isn't distorting memory. It is, that mirror on what really happened. And, I guess I would anticipate in a lot of the kind of work that you're doing, like helping teachers confront that gap between what they believe is happening and what is really happening, as evidenced by the interaction between them and the students and what you're hearing back from students. Like that potentially feels like a big place for a lot of value to be created in kind of the this area of kind of enhancing what's happening in classrooms?
Absolutely. And it's a twofold thing, right? First, you have to internalize an understanding of what should be happening so that when you look at the video, you can do your own gap analysis. And so let's take, for example, talking. We know, too often teachers are talking the majority of the time. And we know that is one of those things we want and need to shift, that whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning. And we want kids to do more of that. So if we're videotaping to actually track who's doing the majority of the talking, then we can check to see if our own sense of how much we're talking is, in line with what's actually happening. And I have done this with teachers and over the years, and there's always a moment in which you like, why don't I shut up? Right? And we have like, did I go on that long? Because in our own mind, it never seems that way, right? So again, this now gives us the tools, the powerful tools to move closer to being that equity focused educator that, oh, now I'm going to actually start to shift how to do that. So I'm actually going to pay attention in a way that I can actually change the dynamics. And maybe that's, I put a timer on my phone, like I will not talk more than 6 minutes before I give it back to the students, or I'll look at where I know they have a stretch of time and we've put in talk structures like protocols or other processes. And you can even videotape those. Well, what are the students talking about in those, protocols? So that you can start to see, is the quality of their interaction, their ability to use academic language, or their ability to really engage with complex ideas evolving, so that now you can know where adjustments are necessary. So it's so important to be able to step back and have the tools to step back, because that video will, it will be your critical friend and tell you the truth in ways that our brains selectively won't all the time.
That's right. That's right. I do the same when I review the videos of my interviews and think, why was my question so long? You mentioned something else that's I feel like video might be really powerful for, which is kind of identifying productive struggle, as you called it. It really brought back to mind a kind of teacher education context, that I had been told about, where on a video, teacher educator, Deborah Ball, I should name her, give her credit for this story. She was talking about how, two different teachers, one said, oh yeah, the students all knew it, the dividing fractions. And the other one's like, I don't think the students got it at all. And it turned out that in the second case, the video revealed that productive struggle, to use your phrase there. So, is that like this is a hunch that I'm getting from what you're telling. Like, should we be looking for those moments? Can we start to learn to say like, oh yeah, like when I felt a discomfort or uncomfortable as the teacher because it didn't feel like it was going well, actually that was, productive struggle?
Mm-hmm. There are a variety of things we can videotape. That is one of them, right? Students' interaction and how you're coaching students. So there are different parts of that, right? So there's the productive struggle where you've set it up, and now you've released it to the students and you're videotaping their ability to actually engage in this in a way that they don't fall back into patterns of compliance, looking to you, expecting you to come in and kind of rescue them or move them to the next stage. So you can actually see those behaviors and how do you move them away from the compliance oriented behaviors. Because here's the rub. Even though you might set things up to be more rigorous and so that they engage in these conversations, the older students are and the more they have been underperforming academically, they're in the lower end of that learning, then the more they have gotten used to or habituated to over scaffolding. So part of what we need to be able to do is to understand, where do we release students and release that scaffold? And we can't do that until we build their capacity. So being able to have that video that allows you to look at it and start to see that is the struggle destructive, meaning kids are just in confusion, or is it productive? Now, here's the thing to say. you have to teach students how to engage in struggle productively. So it's not like just turn it on, videotape it, right? That's just chaos. That when I'm working with educators to be more culturally responsive, one of the techniques we actually do is to learn how to set students up to engage in productive struggle. Protocols, cognitive tools, routines, so that when the teacher's facilitating releases them in there, she's coaching them to engage with complex ideas. Beyond discussion, right? This is where you could be making things, taking things apart. I mean, there are a variety of ways to do that. Making art, but you're still thinking in this way. So video is really good for actually having that, and you can look at it for yourself, understanding what you're feeling. Like it felt like chaos. It felt like I was losing control. I hear teachers saying that a lot. So the video does two things for us. It allows you to desensitize yourself to this feels chaotic when it's actually productive. This is actually what I'm looking for. And it allows, even if you share it with students, for them to see how you guys engaged in that. Because there's a point at which instructional conversation, helping students see themselves in that, becomes powerful. So all video doesn't have to just be for the teacher. It can actually be for students to be stepping back, just like football players and baseball players look at their game tape. Where are we getting kids to look at their game tape, right? So when I conferenced and did writing, I was a composition teacher, we'd always have to stop and step back. Let's look at this essay. What's going right in it? What's going wrong with it? How are you going to change this thing based on, what we learned before? That's called being meta-strategic, not just metacognitive, but literally what new strategy or move will I employ to actually change this and get better? So video really gives us the opportunity to say, okay, how will I improve getting kids to engage in productive struggle if I can't see how they're currently doing it? Just like football players, how do I actually improve making sure the team is gaining yards? I'm not a football person, so I don't know if I'm even saying that right. But the idea that reflective part is important in terms of doing that. Here's the last thing I'll say about it. Probably not the last thing, but I'll say this. Paulo Freire talks about praxis, right? Conceptual understanding that leads and guides informed action that is supported by critical analysis and reflection. So I always like to think of video as being part of praxis, which, in a social justice context is really what a lot of people are talking about. But if you don't have that reflection, then you can't be informing your actions in a way that's moving students toward liberatory education. So I feel like video and those sorts of resources where we really can get a snapshot to make sure that we're not reproducing the kinds of inequity and the kinds of instructional moves that lead to deceleration. Video, there's no more powerful tool that we could be using in the service of equity.
The light bulb went off for me here with the idea that if teachers are using video to find, we were asking about the productive struggle, right? To become, in a way, convinced that, yes, that struggle was productive, that then they could use that same video to convince the students that that feeling that they had yesterday or last week, that was the right feeling. That was a really, that was a new one for me in thinking about how video can be useful for advancing teacher practice. So thank you for that. Zaretta, we're going to take a quick break. More to share, I'm sure. But if you're finding this video somewhere out there shared on a blog, on social media, in an email from your colleague down the hall, make sure to head to pltogether.org for the rest of this conversation, as well as many others. Zaretta, thanks so much for joining us to be part of PL Together.
Thank you for having me.